Hey everybody, it's tafony here once again, and today's rambling about is going to be on the Qubit Electronics Aurora. It is a 12 HP reverb of sorts. It is really a DSP. It's a sound mangling thing, as many of the Qubit sound mangling things are. It is in the vein of a reverb. It creates an atmosphere, I guess, but it certainly doesn't excel at being just a hall reverb. It is so much more. It is a whale sound generator. It is a sound mangling monster. It is definitely not a plate reverb. And before we get into demonstrating what it actually sounds like, the quick disclaimer is I'm not affiliated with Qubit, even though I'm trying to go through all of the Qubit modules in a row for this channel, because while the workflow of the Qubit, you can say like the UI, you think like digital UI, but I guess this is the physical interface of them. I want to do it while it's all fresh in my mind, so I'm going through all of the Qubit modules that I have. I'm not affiliated with Qubit though. I'm not affiliated with anybody. I bought this used with my own money. I'm not a journalist. This isn't journalism. We're just here to explore some Eurorack stuff together. And more importantly than all that, it sounds like this. Qubit Aurora. I've been a little scared for this one because Aurora is really a module. To say I have a love-hate relationship with it usually implies that like you're not satisfied with something, right? Like whenever people use that idiom, it's always like it just sort of, it doesn't necessarily mean you have mixed feelings. It usually implies that you don't like it. But with the Aurora, I find like I either love what it does or I don't find it's usable. So let's start. And I just want to say in saying that, like, when you hit the Aurora just right, it really, really sounds good. So let's bring in some of our dry tone. And what I'm doing, this is totally dry. The mix is totally off on the Aurora side. This is the noise engineering Vert Iter Legio through the steady state gate. I'm actually using a fair bit of steady state gate color for once. I usually try and like keep it really simple and dry, but today I want to get like a Buchla like boing sound ish, and this isn't totally like that, but I just want to do something really sparse so you can really hear the tail of the reverb of the Aurora. So if you hear this, I just want to give us something that gives the Aurora a lot to work with. So that's what that sounds like. It's really simple, but if we bring in some of our Aurora, one thing I'm just going to say right off the bat with the Aurora, and I don't know if it's because I always do pretty high reflex settings or what, but the mixes always seem to just like it goes 0 to 100 very quickly, and that might be a metaphor for the whole module. Because even at the lowest setting, that's pretty wet, right? Like we got nothing, and then it's cranked. And it cranks. Now, I want to say one thing that I think is really weird on some modules, and this isn't just Qubit, this isn't just the Aurora, but this one, it has a gain staging, which I think is kind of like odd. I get it's digital, and it, you know, I think you can actually like use the Aurora to boost line level up to Euro level in some capacity, and maybe that's what I'm doing here. So before we get into anything on the panel, I think that's some kind of weird quirk that I need to make sure I'm sorting out first. So if we bring in this again, and we bring in some mix, if I hold down the shift and the mix, so there's lots of stuff on the Aurora. That's a very Qubit-ism of changing how the panel looks. So it's a nice little feedback, right? There's no screen, but you do get some, you know, some input from the lack of screen. There is a panel on the, you know, that screen, right? So if I remember this correctly, we want to hold shift and turn our mix, which I'm doing. And if I'm turning this up, I think this means we're totally clipping. So I'm going to bring it down. Yeah. And you want, if I remember correctly, do check the manual before you listen to some fool on YouTube. But if you turn this up, you want your levels to be hitting the middle. And I don't know what this blue means. This means the default setting, I believe. Okay, let's do the default setting, because it seems like it is in that middle ground. Right? I don't want to overdrive the Aurora, that's for sure. And if I have any issue with it, it's that it's too loud. So, I'll do that. Let go of it. Yeah. That seems a little better than how it was before. Just gives you a little bit more wiggle room in between blending it in. So with that being said, I think I am going to try and crank the Aurora more than I probably would in an actual patch, just so you can hear it. But yeah, that's something to note, because I think one of the first times I had this one too, it was super, in the shift settings, the input level was like super cranked, and like, why does everything sound like digital clipping? It sounds horrible. But we'll get into making some horrible sounds with it in a moment. Let's bring this up. The biggest macro control on the Aurora is the warp. So when you're at noon, it's at the same octave. And again, what I was talking about with the panel feeding back, when you get to the center, it will turn green. So just to show you where you're at, let's bring in a little bit more of that mix of my chain versus my mic not versus dry versus wet on the Aurora. So that is at noon, so it's the same octave as the incoming audio, but then you can pitch up, which I usually like to do. Let's bring the time down a bit. And that's 1 octave, 2 octaves, 3 octaves at the full. And I think 3 might be a little much, but 2 times 2, 1, maybe there's 4 in there, maybe there's 5. I thought there was 3 in the manual originally, but it's got octaves up to the right and octaves down to the left. Now, I find that the octaves down, like, here, let's just play it. I don't find these are super usable for me, because it just gets a little too bit reduced, right? I don't know what. Here, let's just hear it. It's just, okay, here. If I turn my time down to make this really short. It just gets like really, I don't know. Like when you're taking the bit rate down that low, I don't know. It doesn't sound, this isn't what I want out of a reverb myself. So I probably won't, unless you like the bit crush stuff, but I prefer to use the pitch up because it sounds really nice and a little shrill when I want it to be a little shrill. But I don't know, the pitching down, I don't know. Now, with that being said, I'm going to jump ahead to the modes option. So if you hold shift and hit the... Yeah, this is an incoming audio monitor, which is kind of a, I don't know, interesting thing. There's a reason for it, and if you know it, let me know in the comments. Hold shift and press the reverse. It'll change the sample rate. And the manual has a whole bunch of different explanations for what changing the sample rate does. And by that I mean, like, it describes it as it's completely different colors of the sound, which is kind of interesting, but to me, I don't know if it actually changes it, like, completely in that, like, it doesn't color it in a unique way. It's just kind of up and down in my mind, right? But, I mean, it's Eurorack, so it's not a reverb module. It's a sound exploration computer or whatever. So let's go up from the green setting. And you know what? Actually, to their credit, that really does make a different sound. So in the qubit love language, qubit interface language, the more further we get from the more further we get from blue, the crazier the sounds get. So this is like super low sample rate, and it allows us to get super long sample times, but at the cost of sample quality. Now, if you go down, I don't know, that actually almost sounds better than what I was using before. It's almost like so lo-fi that it smears it. And then blue is the highest, right? So the blue is the highest sample rate. So if we go down a bit, maybe they're doing something behind the scenes to make these sample rates different color being like different tone wise, right? So because yeah, the blue, the lowest one, I don't like how the octave down sounds on the warp setting. Again, warp, just be pitch. I don't know, or octave, maybe. I guess there's probably other things going on behind the scenes that justify it being called warp in this case, but let's go from our blue to green. Try and go down an octave. Yeah, see, that's that, like, sounds like slow-mo in Sony Vegas 2007. But if we go up, these sound really nice. Go down. And then let's get into the teal mode or cyan. It's my favorite color. Let's go up in octaves. Down. Interesting. It's like my problem with the octaves down is that they sound bit reduced, so you put it in a more bit reduced version and it sounds better. I don't know why that is, but you know what? I'll take it because I actually kind of like how this sounds. Cool. But yeah, I still think it's best used shifting up octaves. Let's bring in some of our dry. Just cycle through these. It's probably the best head-to-head comparison. And it's interesting given how important this seems to be that it's behind a shift function, but these are the joys of Eurorack. All right, now, funny too, like, for the video I'm going through this, and I'm showing you the shift function before I'm showing you the function itself. So the function itself being reverse, so you can play your buffer backwards. And it's cool because it makes the envelope swell in, right? At least in this patch. If you're sending it a really dense patch, it probably wouldn't be the same, but like, just because the envelope of my ready for some science? The envelope of my synth voice is like this. When you put it in reverse, the reverb swells in like this. And I actually like using this. And what's cool too is you can control that over CV, which is the actual joys of Eurorack. I should have called the show that. The actual joys of Eurorack. As opposed to what? Well, as opposed to the bloody headaches that Eurorack has often. But yeah, control over reverse and CV. Which is fun to me, but I won't cover the camera with that this whole time, hopefully. Then there's also the freeze, which freezes the buffer. Now, if memory serves, you can't reverse the freeze after it started. No. So, and I think this is based off the time value. So if I crank the time, I get a long buffer. And freeze is sort of like a qubit staple, right? Every module has freeze, which is cool. Like, sending some CV to freeze now might also be an interesting way to bring that into your patch, right? So let's mix in my dry signal. Yeah. I think this, you know, for what I was just whining about with sound exploration idiom, it's fun to, on the reverb, just so we'll send a different LFO to the reverse now and see where it's going to go. Because if you're into ambient stuff, but a little grittier, I think Aurora really would shine. Because it's not pretty at all times. Or I think it just excels at mangling in a harsh way, which is an endorsement from me. And yeah, I like that. Now, control over warp as well. That's just, I'm totally, as if I ever follow my own order, but if I'm sending LFO to warp, I'll bring the knob down to the middle. So the things I like about having that visual feedback on the panel with the color, it's nice because you can see my LFO just bouncing the quote-unquote screen around. Now I should probably go through the panel before I start sending LFOs to other values I haven't talked about yet. So let's bring our mix back up again. I'm going to make my decay on my synth voice a little longer for fun, and just for everyone's sanity, we are going to change the melody a little bit. And you know what? Let's just change the synth voice itself too. Just a hair. Just because you've been listening to the same 4 notes for 20 minutes. So now time is time. And I love a simply named value. So time is how much the echo rings out. But it sort of works in tandem with these other effects, right? Like, all of these things sort of, there isn't a hard and fast envelope decay time, right? Like, you gotta combine different values from the reflect. So if we create more feedback, our time is also extended, right? Because things aren't stopping between our notes, right? But if we crank our time, you can get into the reverby, the traditional reverby, territory. Now this is the blur, which smashes together the different delay lines, and smashes isn't a good term, as if it's like so aggressive, but like it blurs the delay lines, and it gets into this resonator thing at the top, which is interesting, but I won't be using that. I just keep the blur down. Reflect is how much feedback, in a way. I think for what I was complaining about on the Mojave, about things not really lining up the names, I think reflect here is to say that it's not just feedback, there's other things going on. And we appreciate that. Let's go up a little bit in pitch, maybe not that much. Getting into that like foreboding. And then mix, obviously you know what a mix is. And atmosphere, this is like a high pass thing. I think there's multiple things going on is why the naming is that way too. So like the macro sense of it, it's high pass, or what is it called, dampening in the reverb world. They like filter the top and it gets a little bit crushy, which I don't like. I would rather use the decimate on my Prism to have control over that, because here, I don't know. But I like on the other side at noon, I think it's totally clean. But you can do a little high pass, I believe. It gets really shimmery up there. Unless noon is the dry setting, which I don't think it is, but... So yeah, that is the Qubit Aurora, and I want to just do a simple patch. And by simple, I mean what I would use Aurora for in this context of being a reverb that's only on my synth voice, and let's do that now. I think it's too long. Let's bring it shorter. I'm just going to narrate this because we'll do something different for once, right? I think that octave is up too high. And then I think... Okay. I think there's some things like, again, all the knobs, you know, obviously settings have different effects in different modes or other settings when you change them, but when you're at the octave up and you bring in the blur, it sort of creates a weird resonating thing, which I don't like. But if you go down the octaves, it becomes this cool thing. I'll change my... I'm getting, see, this is the sound exploration stuff that I'm getting sidetracked from what I originally wanted to do, which was just a simple, crazy reverb for my synth voice. Yeah, you know what? I do like using the reverse mode. It just makes it sound like I'm intentionally trying to mangle it. You know what I mean? You really want to accentuate that this is supposed to be foreboding. It's not just a bad reverb, right? If we do shorter time, I think that's better. Yeah. Do more reflex, it kind of has this like foreboding effect, right? Very cinematic. Yeah. And then let's do some LFOs, because modulation. Let's send our warp, and this can actually be volt per octave too, which is interesting. Which makes me wonder if I'm not cycling through octaves when I'm sending it LFOs, right? It's probably going unquantized through the whole shebang, right? Interesting idea. If you were making like a cyber grind soundtrack, this might be really, really cool. Let's modulate our time too. Yeah. Let's modulate our atmosphere. Yeah, blur. Go up a little octave. Yeah. That'll bring a little data bender in. Yeah, and a chain. You can't see that, but yeah. Sounds like the intro to some sort of web streaming special. Who was the killer? Find out tonight. Which is too much fun. Okay. Cupid Aurora. Sometimes I love it. Today, I love it. Sometimes I get frustrated with it when I'm trying to just find a quick something with it, and it is not for that, I don't think. It is foregoing the simple reverbs in favor of being a crazy audio mangling machine, and I appreciate that. All right, I'm Tafony. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.